Hey, what's happening? Welcome back to another episode of DB Overthinking. My name is D, and today I'm thinking about authors, bad reviews, and how to take criticism. But before we get into all of that, I gotta give a quick shout out to my Plus Ultra Don't Fretters, my top tier supporters on Patreon, JJ Valdez and Peggy Lou Who. Thank you so much for your support. You're helping to ensure I'm able to keep creating content and put it out as frequently as possible. If you also want to help support the channel and gain access to my private Discord server where you can chat with me and a bunch of other really lovely community members and get some bonus content, make sure you consider subscribing to my Patreon at patreon.com/dfretter. If you want to support the channel but you don't want another monthly subscription for you to manage, you could buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/dfretter. All the money that I get from Ko-fi or the super thank yous here on YouTube goes towards helping me get some video gear to up the production value a little bit. For example, I don't have any overhead lights in my apartment, so right now I'm using a lamp and it's not very powerful, so I need some like studio lights or whatever. And if you don't have any discretionary entertainment funds but you still want to help support the channel, no worries. Just please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. So I started my YouTube/content creation career, if you can call it that, in the internet book space. And in that space, there is no shortage of stories that can be summed up as author crashes out over bad review. Some authors have reacted to bad reviews by harassing and stalking reviewers, dedicating torture porn to reviewers they don't like, figuring out where the reviewer works through Twitter and Instagram, going to that place of work and hitting them over the head with a wine bottle. And those are some very extreme examples, like a couple of them are crimes. And since I joined the internet book space, every time these situations have popped off, I've come across these two sentiments. Authors need to stay out of reviewer spaces, and authors need to learn how to take criticism. This episode is not really about the former of those two sentiments. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you pretty much know my stance on that. I will touch on it a little bit because I think it's changed ever so slightly since the last time we talked about it. This episode is more focused on the latter of those two sentiments. I'm using authors and book talk controversies as a jumping off point for this conversation because that's the origins of this channel. Now, on top of that, a fair amount of the regular viewers of this channel are also writers. That said, I hope that what I have to say can be more expansive and kind of apply to artists who practice other art forms. As soon as you share your work with the world, whether that's one person or the entire internet, you're subjecting your art to scrutiny. Criticism of your work is inevitable. Nobody's work is perfect and not everybody's gonna like your art. And it would be really easy for me to say, so you just gotta thicken your skin, man up, even if you're a woman or a non-binary person, and just take that shit. This would be a YouTube short. But one, I'm gonna say more than that. And two, I don't really think that's the way to respond to criticism. It's definitely a way to respond to criticism, but it's not my way. I end up talking about this a lot with students that I work with and artists that I mentor or coach. I think that learning how to respond to criticism is a necessary skill if you're going to be an artist that shares their work, regardless of whether or not you're a creative entrepreneur or you're a hobbyist just posting online for funsies. Starting with section 1, asking for feedback, because before we get into learning how to take criticism, I think it's important to learn about asking for feedback. I'm going off script a little bit. Asking for feedback is, I think, a necessary part of the creative process. I think that it's necessary to get an outsider's perspective on your work, especially as a writer, and I'm sure for other art forms too, you can get tunnel vision. So sometimes it's just helpful to get fresh eyes on your work and hear what other people have to say about it, hear what's resonating, hear what's not, hear what's working, hear what's not. But if you're an artist, but your practice is solitary or private, and you never intend to share your work, and it's just something you do for just the sheer catharsis of the creative process, then asking for feedback wouldn't be. But what I've noticed is that a lot of writers, especially, and comedians, a lot of writers, especially a lot of young writers will, much like the video where we talked about writers who refuse to read because they don't want to be influenced by other people's work. There are writers who refuse to ask for feedback because they don't want other people's ideas to make their work not entirely their own. It's like other people's ideas and input is an impurity to their work. And that's a flawed way to view feedback. But think about it now, that's a type of bravado. You know what I'm saying? That's a defense mechanism because you're not ready to hear the feedback on your work. And that's fine if you're not ready to hear it. But if you're not ready to hear it, you're not ready to share it. in my opinion. Sharing your art, no matter the scale, whether that's one person or you're like putting it on the world stage, it's an act of vulnerability, especially if the art isn't finished or maybe you're new to the art form you're practicing. Creativity in and of itself is a vulnerable act, you know what I'm saying? You put your heart and your soul into that work, so then when you share it, especially when it hasn't been refined or it's not finished or whatever, when you're in this open, vulnerable spot and somebody goes like, I don't really like your soul, that hurts. Ouch. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you weren't expecting that or you didn't like think of that as a possibility, that stings even more. But before we even get to the point where we're like, but let's go back to before we even get the feedback and talk about asking for the feedback. I'm not always great at this myself, but I think that it's important to know why you're sharing a piece of work before you do, if that makes sense. Because there are definitely times where I'm like thinking about writing a piece or writing a joke or something, and I'm like workshopping ideas or whatever, and the idea is not even a fully formed thought, and I'm just kind of like talking out loud, especially like at my wife, and she'll just kind of look at me like, that's dumb. What are you doing? And then I feel like Stephen He, you know what I'm saying? Like emotional damage. So when you share your work, what is the purpose of it? Are you looking for notes? Are you trying to invite someone into your creative process because you're excited about what you're creating and you want to share that excitement with somebody? What's happened to me a lot is I'll be doing the latter. I'm just really excited about something that I'm working on, and I'll show it to somebody, but they think I'm doing the former and I'm looking for notes. And then my feelings get hurt because I wasn't ready for all the things they think are wrong with whatever it is I'm working on. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that communication is key. If you're looking for notes, do you know what you're looking for specifically within your work? Like sometimes we know there's an issue, but we can't quite put our finger on it. So we might ask something really general, like, hey, does anything stick out to you in a bad way? Or does something not resonate with you? Is there something not clicking? And those are like really valid questions to ask somebody, especially if it's somebody that you trust, like a writing buddy or another artist who you respect or something like that. When I used to be a musician, sometimes I would share like rough versions of tracks with my wife, and I would ask her something like, what do you think of the bass line? And before she would start talking about, I only want to hear about the bass line. I don't really give a shit if you don't like, you know, the drums or the guitar tones or something like that, because we're going to change all that anyway. Being able to clearly communicate whether or not you're looking for feedback is going to help, like if you are sharing your art with someone that you love, like a parent or a partner or a friend or something like that. And if you are looking for feedback, knowing specifically what you're looking for notes on is helpful for the person that you're asking for feedback from. If you're just sharing to share, you are still kind of running the risk of getting unsolicited advice, because some people can't help themselves or aren't self-aware enough to know that's not what you're doing. And it is totally okay, in my opinion, to say, oh, I'm not really looking for notes, as politely or as rudely as you like. I will say though, if you cannot handle the idea of somebody not liking your work, that is an indicator that you may not be ready to publish your work or share your work. Or at the very least, it's an indication that you might need a little bit more time with your work. Or it might be okay to start small with like writing buddies, beta readers, editors or something, and maybe don't like publish an unedited draft of something with a bunch of artwork and then spend months crashing out on the internet because nobody liked it or something like that. I don't know. That's just a crazy thing that popped into my head. All right, section 2, how not to take criticism. I don't really know if like me saying the sections out loud is helpful or annoying. So we talked a little bit about asking for feedback. Now let's move on to the second section where we talk about responding to feedback once we get it. This section may come off a little bit like I'm telling you what to do. That is not my intention. You know, any advice I give is not because I think that I'm wiser or smarter or an authority. And I'm just speaking as a guy who's made a lot of mistakes in his creative life. I'm not an expert at anything. I'm just a dude with a microphone. But I'm breaking down this section into 2 parts. Section 2A is called preemptive perfectionism. Criticism doesn't always feel good, you know, even if you ask for it, even if it's constructive, it's not always going to feel good, because again, like you're asking people to kind of scrutinize and poke at like something really vulnerable and something really important to you, probably. So in a way to try to protect themselves from feeling those feelings, they'll try to get ahead of the criticisms and make their work perfect. I do this a lot where I tend to overthink, big shock, what I'm saying in these videos, and I'll try to I'll try to think of every angle of how I'm wrong. I guess the thinking is if your art is perfect, then it's above critique. It can't be criticized if it's perfect. I think that everyone can agree that nobody's perfect. Yet for some, the idea that their work may have flaws or their work may not be to somebody's liking is like too much for them to handle. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going off script a little bit, but I wonder if that trying to protect yourself from criticism isn't just about protecting your feelings, but also maybe like if people find, it's a little bit of imposter syndrome, where if people find flaws in your work or they don't like your work, they're going to find out that you're not a real writer or a real singer or a real comedian or whatever. I know for me, it's not so much that, but like I've bombed a little bit in the last couple of weeks. I bombed 3 shows in a row. I got a couple laughs. Like it wasn't dead silent, but it wasn't as, the shows haven't been as good as they'd been before. And I think for me, a little bit of fear comes in of like, oh, I'll never make it if I don't have this like spotless record. Going a little off topic, maybe perfectionism and creativity don't mix is a different video. But being a preemptive perfectionist in order to protect yourself from scrutiny in your creativity reminded me of an essay on Substack called Your Perfectionism Will Not Save You by Ian Arten. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. I tried to look it up. Didn't find a lot of conclusive results, and I'm really bad at pronouncing names. That's just part of the channel's lore. That should be on the bingo card, Mo. This essay is not perfectly aligned with what I'm discussing here. It's still a good read. If you want to check it out, I'll link it down below. And there are some quotes from it that resonated with me, and I kind of read this around the same time I was thinking about this topic. First quote, it's real short. It's, our relationship to our craft is as visceral and as real as the ones we have with people. And it kind of reminded me of the dad from Finding Nemo and how some of us artists can be like overprotective helicopter parents around our work. I forget what video it's from, but I remember like this was probably years ago, but it really stuck out to me. I got a comment from an author who disagreed with the idea that reviews are for readers, and she said something like, my books are my babies and I'm not going to let anybody talk bad about my babies. But I remember thinking like, books aren't babies. Like, I understand it doesn't feel good to have your work criticized, and it doesn't feel good to like read negative things about something you work really hard on. Like, none of those things feel good. I totally get that. That's partly why I think reviews are for readers, so you don't see that shit, because you don't have the time to argue with the whole internet, bro. Like, don't do that. But I'm going off script. I just think that like being that overprotective and that precious with your work and refusing to let other people have opinions on it is it just tells me that you're not ready to share it. A couple other quotes from this essay that resonated with me. Perfectionism is wanting to be unharmable. Your comparisons are not your peers, but God or whatever other force rules benevolent and unquestionable over this cosmos. It is striving for that which is beyond humanness, after all. We accept we are wired and flawed and abusing yourself in the process. And this is like the last little paragraph of the essay. Sure, your perfectionism might make you exceptional, but it will certainly always make you miserable. I think you deserve more than that. May you never sit alone in the dark with only your cruelty to keep you company. May you cloak yourself in the same kindness you so readily lavish upon others. Like I said, I don't think that this perfectly aligns with what I'm talking about, but this idea of trying to make your work perfect so that it can't be critiqued because you're scared of what someone might say about it. And it's going to make the creative process even more painful than it already can be. I say this because like while I find a lot of catharsis and a lot of like purpose in the act of creativity, there are also times where like making something's hard, you know, like writing my chapbook, there are parts of it that were really tough. And, then it comes to like editing it and all the like boring admin stuff. That's not necessarily painful. But when you start to get really, you're looking for the devil in the details, that can drive you mad. I think the tortured artist trope is overdone. And sometimes people will talk about the tortured artist as in like somebody who has kind of glamorized being depressed or uses substance or whatever, or deprives themselves for the sake of the creative act. And that's not necessarily what I'm talking about in this case. I'm talking about somebody who punishes themselves for their work not reaching their own level of taste. I strive to reach my own level of taste in my own work, but I don't think of it as a bar that I need to meet in order to be worthy of being an artist or in order to be worthy of my own love and respect. I think of it more as like a North Star for me to follow, because I think the better you get at something, the better your taste is going to get also, if that makes sense. Like, the better you get at something, I think the more sophisticated your palate. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe when I'm older, I'll disagree with that because, I'm in my 30s, but maybe in my 50s, I won't feel the same way. I don't know. And you'll probably not know because I don't think I'll be a YouTuber in my 50s, probably. God, that'd be so funny. Hey, what's happening? Welcome back. But yeah, getting ahead of criticism by trying to make your work perfect is the perfect way to drive yourself insane and to ruin your relationship with your own artwork. Section 2B, reacting to criticism. This part of the video is real short, real simple. Like in the stories that I referenced at the beginning of this video, or like any kind of TikTok, book talk drama, there are varying degrees of horrible. I'm not about to say that like going on a Twitter rampage is equivalent as stalking someone and hitting them in the head with a wine bottle. One's cringe and embarrassing, one's a crime. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're different. The commonality between all these stories is like an author crashing out over bad reviews is somebody reacting, like they're in their feelings and they're not their emotions aren't regulated. Maybe there's other things going on, because there's got to be something real wrong with you if you're gonna like dedicate torture porn to somebody. If you're gonna write torture porn about somebody, or you're gonna spend all your time making burner accounts to keep tabs on this random reviewer that you don't know, and then making your family and friends also like comment really hateful shit on their page and all this nonsense, like some screws loose if that's how you want to spend your time. Personally, just my opinion, not a mental health professional. I'm saying I think something wrong with you, but they're acting from an emotional place, they're reacting because their egos are hurt. And while I think it's perfectly valid, or it's very understandable for your feelings to be hurt, for your ego to be hurt a little bit, the way that some of these authors have gone about like trying to get revenge or punish someone is not okay. Like, you don't need to get revenge. You don't need to punish someone because they didn't like your work. That's wild. Some of these are crimes, and I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of like what the victim of that wine bottle incident from 2015 went through. That was probably very traumatic. And the big influencer turned author who was like stalking and harassing reviewers, I don't know if that's a crime, but it's definitely disturbing. And so I'm not trying to downplay that stuff. Also, totally missed this in my notes. In the case of Lauren Huff, like crashing out over a 4.5 out of 5-star review. It's not even that it's not a bad review. It's not that someone didn't like their work. They just didn't like it enough for her ego, which is crazy to me. But yeah, I guess in this section, it's just simple as like, hey, don't fucking do that. The third section is how I respond to criticism. Could have titled this section How to Respond to Criticism, but again, I don't really like telling people what to do or what they should do. It's not really my vibe, because I don't have all the answers. I just have answers for me. You know what I'm saying? So this is a process that I'm developing for myself, and I'm just sharing it. Maybe it resonates, maybe it doesn't. maybe you aren't really even listening to this video. And this isn't necessarily about responding in the sense of like saying something in response to getting criticism, because, you know, like especially here on YouTube, not every piece of criticism I get is worth responding to. This is more about how do I deal with the feelings that can come up when I get criticism, regardless of whether we're talking about a video or a stand-up clip or a joke or a poem or something like that. So step one is slow down. I've talked about it before. I used to be a pretty toxic dude, and I'd be very reactive. Like, I've always been a sensitive guy. Like, I've always had big feelings, but I would respond to those feelings with just anger a lot of the time, and I was a hard person to be around. So I'm trying to slow down and not be as reactive. I'm trying to just take a second and like do emotional inventory. Like, obviously, like my immediate feeling will be angry, but I'm like, what am I angry about? A lot of times I can go from like thought to feeling to action without really thinking about the action I'm about to take. And so instead of like lashing out verbally or shutting down and retreating within myself, I'm trying my best to just like hold space for that feeling and think about how I'm going to respond, or if I'm going to respond to what was said. I think the last stand-up show my wife came to, it was like months and months ago, and I don't think I was I was hosting the show. I'd produced the show with Sunshine and Tones and those guys, the Talia production crew. We were on the train back to our apartment. I was just like, oh yeah, pretty good show. And then my wife just started to tell me everything she didn't like about the way I host shows, because she likes me better as just doing a set. And I just decided not to like really say anything for a little bit, to just kind of like figure out like, what am I feeling? And I felt blindsided and all this other stuff, but it was just like, instead of being like, okay, well, I didn't fucking ask or whatever, I was just like, okay, calm down, it's fine. Step two is check the source. This is something that my mom used to say to me all the time when I would complain about people like shitting on my music or whatever. Looking back, my music wasn't that great, so I get why people would shit on it, but I wasn't mature enough to handle that. But my mom would tell me to check the source. What she meant was like, is the feedback coming from a trusted source? Is this someone that you know and respect? Did you even ask? You know, is the feedback coming from a respectful place? And these are questions you can ask for yourself. Like here on YouTube, you know, you're gonna get hate comments. You know, you're going to get comments from people who like, maybe like I get a lot of comments from people who don't even watch the videos. They just figure out what the video is about and then, you know, submit an essay or say something racist or whatever. And there's a bunch of people who, I don't know why this is happening, but there are people commenting on like 2-year-old videos and disagree. And I don't remember what I said. That was 2 years ago. I fucking hate that. There's so much construction outside. And like sometimes it's okay to just like, they don't get what you're doing or they don't get where you're coming from. I'm not really a big fan of like a dismissive, you just don't get it, because sometimes people do get it and they still don't like it. You know, like there are people who will watch my old videos where I'm reviewing books and I'm being very intense and critical, because that was kind of the joke. It was like the joke of the channel used to kind of be, I don't really like this genre. I'm not the demographic this genre is for, but I'm going to review this as seriously as possible and make jokes about it. And if people don't get that, I understand this isn't for me and that's kind of the point, you know, then they just don't get it. That opinion doesn't hold a lot of weight. Especially since I don't really do that anymore. You don't like it, you don't have to watch. And then there are people who are like, no, I understand that's what you're doing, and I still don't like that you're doing it. And then their opinion's valid, but whatever. If it's coming from a disrespectful place of like, they're calling me the N-word, or they're threatening me and my family, or some such, or they don't know what the word bigotry means and think the fact that I'm like, conservative dudes were threatening me on Instagram is bigotry, then like, I don't really care what you have to say. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's not necessarily tone policing. That's just like, when it comes to receiving feedback, like if it's not coming from a respectful place or it's not coming from a place where they're trying to be constructive, I don't necessarily think I'm obliged to take that. If you're calling me out for something I did that was disrespectful, like, I'm a cisgendered, heterosexual, able-bodied man. So if someone from a demographic that's like from a marginalized identity that I don't have, and they want to call me in and say, hey, this thing that you said or this joke that you said was in poor taste or whatever, I'm not saying they have to necessarily like be respectful about it. I appreciate that, but like, I'm not saying they have to. I'm just saying that like, if you're calling me a racial slur or telling me to, you know, off myself because you don't like what I do, I don't have to listen to you. And as a comedian, like in real life or out and about, I don't know how to word that when I'm not online, you know, and I'm just at a show and I'm leaving a show and a comedian just walks up and starts telling me how to rewrite my joke, or they want to tag my joke, or they want to tell me how to change my stage presence or something. I do stop and think about like, are you a place I want to be? Because I'm not going to take directions from anybody who hasn't been where I want to go. You know what I'm saying? And that's another thing to consider. Like, you know, if you're making a manga and your friend who only reads the classics gives you unsolicited advice on your story, you don't have to listen to them because they don't understand the medium you're trying to create in. Or if you are a rapper and your friend who only listens to Jason Mraz has points to make, you don't have to listen to that if you don't want to, you know, especially if they're being a dick about it. And so check the source and see where they're coming from and see if this is somebody whose opinion you respect, because while everybody is entitled to their opinion, not all opinions are equal and not all opinions need to matter to you. And this part of the video isn't necessarily the best part to put this in, but something that occurred to me while I was writing the video is that reviews aren't criticism. You know what I mean? So it's like, ask yourself, like, what is this for? Is necessary, because I stand by the general sort of like internet book space etiquette / piece of advice that reviews are for readers and authors shouldn't go looking at their Goodreads, because reviews aren't crit. They're not meant to help the author improve in their writing. I get a lot of pushback. They're like, well, how else am I supposed to get better? It's like, take a class, get a writing buddy, beta readers, editors, whatever. Like, and if you're not willing to put the time, effort, money into improving your work, I don't think that you should be in business. That's just me. If you're not willing to invest, if you don't think your work is worth investing that time, energy, money, I don't get why it's worth investing my time and money to read it. You know what I'm saying? Reviews are not like feedback that you can directly employ to improve your craft. They're reviews of a product. They're meant to inform other readers about, like, they're meant for other readers so that other readers can make informed buying and reading choices. And I stand by that, especially since there are so many like examples of authors finding reviews and not handling them well and doing scary, dangerous, unhinged things. So I really don't think that it's good for authors to seek out reviews, especially since they're not meant to help you get better at your craft. That said, I was thinking about this a little bit as I was writing this. As a business, like if you're a creative entrepreneur and your craft is writing, it would be kind of wild for you to ignore the products of, or the review of your products. You know what I'm saying? Because like if you're a visual artist and you sell like postcards and stickers and stuff on Etsy, or like mugs that you make if you sculpt, or maybe you like sell little taxidermied mice in homemade outfits or something, like you're gonna read your reviews on Etsy or on your Shopify store. That's not a sponsor. Do not go to Shopify until they pay me to talk about them, okay? Be a real one. So like as a business, it makes sense that you would want to know what people think of your product. So after I thought about that, I thought maybe my opinion would change. And it doesn't really, because I still don't think that authors should be spending like a bunch of time looking at reviews, because of the way it's almost like, I don't want to be like not all authors, you know what I mean? Because there's enough of them that have done some pretty crazy, scary things. And in general, I'm just like, nah. Even like the influencer who's really popular, and like someone on Threads like, I don't really like their book, and then she responded, and that person got harassed by the influencer's fans. That was crazy. And that author influencer didn't go seek out that review, I don't think, but responding and putting that on her fans' radar, not cool. Maybe she didn't think about it. I don't know. I don't care. I don't like that. I don't really care about, I don't want to talk about that influencer because I don't like her. I've never did. But I think like as an author, like checking reviews yourself, maybe putting yourself in a position where you're like gonna get your feelings hurt, and it may be better to ask a friend or hire someone to do it or something, just so like you can get relevant information about the reviews as a product, so you can do better for your business. At this point, I'm like, it's maybe not all authors, it's enough. Can't stop anyone from doing that if they're gonna do it. You know what I'm saying? I can't tell people what to do. I have no authority over your life. And like, to be honest, if you're gonna go on Goodreads, read reviews, but you're just gonna keep your feelings to like yourself or the group chat, I don't really care what you do, bro. Like, just don't stalk people. Don't hit people with wine bottles. Don't write torture porn about people. And I don't really give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, don't come into this comment section and justify to yourself why it's okay for you to do that. I don't care. I'm more interested in like readers feeling safe to talk about the books they read. And I'm also more interested in you not getting your feelings hurt because you're feeling really raw and vulnerable because you just released your debut novel about Sherlock Holmes fighting dinosaurs or whatever. I don't know what you do. I don't know what you write. I don't care. And then the third and final step is take action or don't. Again, sometimes I just have to ask myself, is this even worth responding to? Like, if someone clearly doesn't know where I'm coming from or clearly doesn't understand like what I'm trying to do, then I'm just like, I don't know if this is worth having a conversation, because if I have to explain it to you, you still aren't gonna like it, and you probably still won't get it. That's fine. Is the feedback valid? You know, like I get comedians telling me I should do more like sexual jokes or talk about my dick or make fun of my wife or whatever. And this is just stuff I don't want to do. Sometimes it's worth asking, like, can I do anything about this feedback? Like, someone's like, hey man, be taller. It's like, I can't. Do you want to do anything about it? Because what if someone really doesn't like something about your work that you actually really like? You know, what if like you paint monochromatic landscapes but you only use like variations of purple, you know? And then like, I don't like how purple your work is. It's like, okay, well that's my thing, so like step off, bro. And this section isn't meant to be like dismiss people like, you don't get it, or like your opinion holds no weight or you're invalid. But it is more like trying to encourage people to critically engage with criticism that they get. And you don't have to like water off a duck's back everything, and you also don't have to take everything to heart and take it as truth, because I think if you close yourself off to hate comments and positive comments, you're cutting yourself off to that positivity, you know. And I don't think that's necessarily the way to go about it. And also, if you take everything to heart, it's gonna hurt, and it's going to pull you in all these different directions, and you're going to end up, maybe if you're a people pleaser, you're going to end up trying to please everybody, and then you won't please anybody. The idea of like, I don't remember if it was Bo Burnham or who it was, but someone was like, you got to say like fuck you to the haters and fuck you to the lovers so you can be in a happy medium. And that actually doesn't seem happy to me, because again, if you close yourself off to negativity, you're closing yourself off to positivity. And our brains are hardwired to keep an eye out for negativity, because that's how we used to survive, you know. Like it's sometimes like these health and wellness, peace, love, positivity, live, laugh, love type of people will kind of frame like you're dwelling on something negative as like a moral failing. And I don't really think that it is. I think it's a function of the brain that's trying to help you survive. It's not trying to help you thrive, but it is trying to help you survive. And so in order to thrive in your creative life, in your writing journey, is to learn how to discern whether or not that negativity is true, valid, if it matters to you, and then move on from there. Hold space for your feelings, let yourself feel that, and then move on. At least that's the way I see it. And then this fourth bonus step build a community. Taking my mom's advice of like checking the source, I started to assemble different trusted sources for feedback. So like when it comes to YouTube, I actually engage a lot with my OG patrons about stuff that I'm doing on the channel and stuff that I'm doing on Patreon. Hey, I'm thinking about making these changes, or I'm thinking about doing these videos. What do you think of that? When it comes to more like creative, like when it comes to other artistic endeavors, you know, like I'm in a regular dialogue with Sunny and with Tones about like videos that we want to make. Like we're making plans to do some exciting stuff where it's not that I'm excited exciting stuff that I'm excited about. I'm so tired right now. And then I talked to my wife Alana about some stuff, and then when it comes to like writing jokes, there's like 3 people who I will show like a rough draft to and be like, I'm thinking about writing a joke like this. What do you think? And then after that, once I've like gotten the jokes to a place where I feel like they're performance ready, I'll show them to 2 other people and be like, what'd you think of that? Like I said before, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but that doesn't mean that everyone's opinion is equal. And it doesn't mean that everyone's opinion has to hold a lot of weight for you. You know, and I think part of like learning how to take criticism is learning to understand whose opinion matters to you and why. Like here on YouTube, there are a bunch of like internet randos with AI generated like profile pics. I don't really care what they think, you know? They're like, hey man, you talk too much. I'm like, yeah, I'm a yapper. That's what I do. That's the content. If you don't like it, just don't watch it. I don't think that there needs to be like a one size fits all, catch all rule for how to respond to criticism or how to navigate like people having opinions on your work. I really don't think that. What I do think is that it's good to develop a process on how you're going to deal with feelings that come up if someone has something negative to say about your work. I don't think it's about closing yourself off from that negativity, because if you close the door to negativity, you close yourself off to positivity. And I think one of the best parts about sharing your work is the connections that you can build with people who like your work, but it's going to be really hard to build those connections if you close yourself off to the positive things they want to say. But if you share your work will get criticized at some point. You know, art is subjective. Your work isn't for everybody. And if you try to make your work for everybody, it ends up being for nobody. You cannot protect your work from that subjectivity. That's not within your control, but what is within your control is how you choose to respond to that criticism. Crash out on the internet. You can spend months spinning narratives. You can write really nasty, gross things and dedicate it to somebody you don't like. I don't think you should, but that's a way to do it. Or you can take a second, take a breath, realize that you don't necessarily have to listen to these people. I'm sure there's somebody out there who could weaponize what I'm saying and be like, oh, well, people are saying that, you know, my work is transphobic, but their opinion doesn't matter to me, so whatever. But they were going to be shitty and not care about that anyway, so I'm not really going to sweat that. And that's not what I'm saying. Like, I think if you get criticism where it's like, oh, your work is causing harm, or this viewpoint is harmful to this group of people or something like that, like even if that doesn't feel good, especially like that's definitely not going to feel good. That's definitely not going to feel good. I think it's like part of being an artist, part of being a decent human being is at least hear them out and wrestle with that and sit with it and hopefully learn from it, because I don't think dismissing it or shutting it down is really the way to go. But I do think this process is a little more complicated than just thickening your skin. I do think that the longer you go and the more kind of hate comments you get or like little jabs that you get, you do start to develop some resiliency to it. But I don't think that resiliency and being able to just cut yourself off from all of it is the answer. I think it's part of it, but it's not the end all be all. Again, I do think just having a process of of developing emotional regulation skills is also part of it. Developing the skill of learning how to take criticism and learning how to respond to it in kind is not the right word, but like not being a dick about it is a necessary skill if you're going to be an artist who shares their work, regardless of if that's as a creative entrepreneur or as a hobbyist who's sharing their work for fun. I think that's everything that I want to say in this episode. Gosh, this video is going to be long. I'm sorry. I keep thinking these are going to be short. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you to the patrons for supporting. Patreon.com/dfredder if you want to support the channel. Join the Discord server. Get some bonus content. CodeS5.com if you just want to support the channel one time. Help me get a studio light so that when the sun starts going down, the video doesn't get darker. And if you don't have any discretionary entertainment funds, that's all good, but please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. My name is D Fredder. Don't fret. I'll see you next time. Peace.